Good day to you all. We are Group 3 and 4 here to discuss and present to you our project collaboration. Rereading Philippine History, a thorough analysis of the Philippine Revolution, the cry of Balintawak.
Year after year, it has remained unresolved, left to be debated upon and studied by researchers on when the cry actually happened. Through the use of triangulation method as well as assessing and analyzing sources, this study would explore and discuss different accounts from people who were either present, is related to some who took part in it, or is part of the cry of Balintawak, in order to gain a clearer understanding of what happened and be able to determine when it took place. This would then benefit future researchers and people with the information provided in this study. With that, this could be used as a secondary source if need be. This study aims to discuss credible and accurate accounts of the events that unfolded in the latter half of August 1896, and possibly determine the exact date wherein the cry of Balintawak transpired. But first, what exactly is the first cry?
Well, you see, the cry of Balintawak, or the first cry, is an event in which the Filipinos started their first staging act of revolution. The cry actually refers to the first clash between the Katipuneros, showing the reform by tearing up their cedulas into pieces, implicating that they have pronounced to refuse their enslavement and servitude with the Spaniards. The whole story of how, what, and where the revolution really started is still a mystery to most of us Filipinos due to the significant number of stories and accounts which popped up having different timelines and places that will be tackled in our presentation as we have already studied the accounts. The cry of Balintawak happened on August 26, 1896 as proved by the testimonies of people who had witnessed the event, which means that their versions are accurately detailed and show credibility.
Indeed, due to the varying perspectives regarding how the first cry of Balintawak transpired and detailing how those who were present experienced it, it was an event so powerfully symbolic that it would determine the fates of Filipinos for generations to come. Which would leave us with the question, when did the cry of Balintawak really happen? It started in 1896, in the month of August, when the members of the secret society of the Katipunan planned against the Spaniards, marking the beginning of the Philippine Revolution. Several events have actually transpired and led to the turning point on the 26th of August, when the tearing of cedulas, also known as tax certificates, was done in defiance of the maltreatment inflicted by the Spaniards on the Filipino people. This action symbolized that the Philippines was ready for a revolution to take their country back, even if it meant violently opposing the Spanish rule.
This cry started the armed struggle for independence and changed the history of the Philippines forever, with their main purpose being to escape the tyranny at the hands of the Spaniards. This was Andres Bonifacio's goal, to lead the Katipuneros into a battle for the nation's independence and to avenge the death of Jose Rizal. Eyewitnesses to this turning point in the country's history wrote differing accounts based on their own perspectives, resulting in contradictory statements that will baffle historians for years to come. Such differing accounts will then be discussed accordingly. I have even heard that articles were made about these, am I right?
That is true. Many articles were made featuring these various accounts that detail their own perspective on the events that took place, which just makes us wonder, what version is the most credible and accurate? Different accounts of witnesses have emerged with a significant number of records, one of which is the narrative of Pio Valenzuela's. He claims that he is the first-hand witness of the said cry of Pugadlawin, and that it had happened on the 23rd of August 1896. He surrendered to Bianco a month after the said cry on the 3rd of September 1896, which started the revolution. He then stated in an investigation that the cry of Balintawak was the first staging point of the Philippine Revolution, and that it was on the 26th of August 1896 when it had happened. He has related his first version while it was still fresh in his memory, as he fled and abandoned the revolution. Although this claim of his was disrupted after some time, which might have been due to his fading memory, as he wrote memoirs of the revolution, with which he then claimed that the cry took place on the 23rd of August 1896 at Pugadlawin. This would be his second version of the event. According to his account, or at least the second version he has written, that the first place of refuge was in Balintawak, and that there were 500 Katipuneros who met at Apollonius Samson's place. In the yard of Juan Ramos was where 1,000 Katipuneros met on the 23rd of August. The Katipuneros were discussing if they should proceed with the revolution on August 29th. Some even protested against the war, namely Teodoro Plata, who is Bonifacio's brother-in-law. Those involved who tore their cedulas after the meeting shouted, "Long live the Philippines!"
With this, the account of Valenzuela may not have been credible enough to further assess the real date behind the controversy due to his change of statement. Although it is important to take note that his first version, in which he stated while it was still fresh from his memories, may have been greater than that of his second version. Let us now take a view on the other existing accounts, in hopes to clear some confusion, which also claims a different date from what Darrell have mentioned. The next account that we will look into is the interpretation of Santiago Alvarez, who was a Katipunan warlord of Cavite and the son of Mariano Alvarez, a relative of Gregorio de Jesus, wife of Antes Bonifacio, who wrote his own version of the cry, which he called as Cry of Bahay Toro. Although his version cannot not be considered equal to those of Samson, Masangkai, and Valenzuela, two of which were eyewitnesses, Santiago Alvarez stated that the cry happened on August 24, 1896. 10 o'clock in the morning, in the barn of Melchora Aquino, there were 1,000 Katipuneros along with Bonifacio and his men. As the meeting adjourned at 12 o'clock noon, loud cries were heard saying, "Long live the sons of the country." Although he was a Katipunan warlord, his account's credibility and accuracy could be questioned, for he was in Cavite when the said cry happened and was not an eyewitness to begin with, unlike both Masangkai and Samson, wherein they were present as the cry and fight broke out between the Katipunan and Spaniards, as mentioned in their accounts. His account does not equal to other versions by the said accounts of the eyewitnesses.
Another statement containing a different date was from the Lacambini of the Katipunan, Gregorio de Jesus, who is also referred to as the wife of Andres Bonifacio, who is then considered to be the Supremo of the Katipuneros. She oversaw their documents as well as their weapons, and even helped in safeguarding them. As the outbreak of the revolution began, she was with her parents in Caloocan as Bonifacio left town. She went to Manila upon hearing that she was about to be arrested, and later joined Bonifacio in the fight against the Spaniards. According to Gregorio de Jesus, during those times when the members were being arrested, they returned to Caloocan. As they too were about to be arrested, Bonifacio left town along with the other Katipuneros, in which he stated that was when the cry began, on August 25, 1896. She was with her parents in Caloocan when she had heard news from her friends that she was about to be arrested. As she fled upon hearing the Spaniards were coming to arrest her, at 11 o'clock she secretly went through La Loma to escape. She returned to Manila, where she was denied refuge in some houses, in which she then found out about how the houses that catered to her end up being seized, punished, and some even died in exile. Her account may have been unreliable and not credible enough, for she was in Caloocan with her parents when it had happened, and was not an eyewitness to the event. She has only heard about the news from other people, namely her friends, and that too may have been altered. As mentioned, she joined Bonifacio only after the said cry. Similarly, Captain Diaz, who is the Spanish commander of the Guardia Civil Veterana of Manila, was the one who investigated the discovery of the rebellion, more specifically the Katipunan, stated in his account, the first site as well as the date of the first rally of the revolution was based on his investigation and report findings. In his report, he stated that the cry occurred on the 25th of August, 1896 at Balintawak. According to his proclamation, as Bonifacio fled to Caloocan and then to Balintawak, where they were said to be attacked by his fellow Guardia Civil at the outskirts of the town, on the 24th as they retreated in hiding. The following day, on the 25th, there came a big meeting, on to which they discussed on what to do next, considering that arrest was made and that their situation has become challenging. Due to this, some were even considering backing down and even surrender. Yet, Bonifacio opposed and believed otherwise. He was in it to take arms and fight. This was when Bonifacio's strong influence was seen as it was put to vote. An overwhelming majority were in agreement with him. Orders were then made to strike at dawn of August 30th.
With what was just mentioned, the Guardia Civil's report, Captain Olegario Diaz and Gregorio de Jesus' accounts can be considered inaccurate, for in both accounts, they did not experience the event firsthand and has only heard about it from other people. It is possible that the statements he received in order to make his report and investigation may have been altered, not to mention that he too has an undetailed report. While the last proclaimed date of the revolution was said to be on August 26, 1986, at the rustic barrio in Balintawak, a few kilometers north of the city of Manila. Through consulting surviving Katipuneros, respected and prestigious historians, this date and site was officially acknowledged and adopted by the government during early American regime. This was stated by an eyewitness, Guillermo Masangkai, in his memoirs. He is also known to be the Katipunan general and happens to be Andres Bonifacio's childhood friend. A monument was built near the site and was inaugurated on September 3, 1911. According to his account, a big meeting was held at Apollinio Samson's house on August 26, 1896 at Balintawak, consisting of the board members and leaders of Katipunan, one of which was Bonifacio, along with delegates from different towns were present. As the meeting rages on in 9 o'clock in the morning, with Emilio Jacinto as a secretary, some of the members were considering to postpone the revolution, namely Chidoro Plata, Pantas, and Valenzuela opposed the plan as they said that it would only harm them in the end, and that starting it early could go wrong without weapons and food. Bonifacio, upon realizing how he is about to lose the argument, he then went out to the people, told them what the leaders were discussing, and let them decide persuading the people to revolt, wherein as a result, all were in favor. Thus, the tearing of cedulas happened. Seeing as how the cedulas were destroyed, majority voted for the revolution. For it symbolizes their enslavement, the tearing of cedulas was their act of severing ties with the Spanish government. Destroying their cedulas meant that they could no longer go home, that they are set to see this through, a show of commitment to the cause, as one would interpret. For without these cedulas, they are bound to be persecuted by the Spanish government. He too gave his admiration to Bonifacio as he recalls how influential he was. Seeing that after he reported back to the leaders that the people have already destroyed their cedulas, the majority of them voted for the revolution. Masangkai introduced Bonifacio well as what kind of hero he was, and this document is the one that introduced and made us acknowledge them in our history. When he appeared at the meeting on the 26th, as he removed his coat leaving him with his collared shirt with tie, although he was just a warehouse, his words, the way he speaks was like a true leader. Masangkai's account even attested to when on 5 o'clock in the afternoon, the Katipuneros celebrated the decision to continue the revolt. They were soon warned on the arrival of the Spaniards, and was divided into strategic sections as they prepare for the fight, which was led by Andres Bonifacio, Emilio Jacinto, and the rest of the leaders of the Katipunan. Masangkai was stationed in the bank, guarding places where the Spaniards might pass. He was an eyewitness to the cry of Balintawak. Masangkai's account is credible enough for he was one of the few to truly enable us and inform us of the details on the first cry, which was adopted by the government during the American regime. He was able to provide details such as how the leaders were arguing about when and if they should proceed with the revolt immediately. He depicted the things that happened in orderly that it made his manuscript a credible piece of our history.
Similar to what Kenneth has mentioned, Don Vicente Samson, also an eyewitness to the cry of Balintawak, is the native of the land and confirmed the validity, authenticity, credibility, and integrity of the first cry, as described by General Masangkai. He was able to experience the event at such a young age along with his brother and father. Although he is seen as a community leader and a man of means, not many knows that Samson is one of the few who has survived and witnessed the cry of Balintawak, as well as the fight that broke out among the Katipuneros and the Spaniards. According to his account at that time, Don Vicente was a 12-year-old child who witnessed the event with his father and older brother, all of whom were Katipuneros. He has even recalled the first fight that went down that same day and afternoon, and were one of the few people who participated in the ceremonies of war. He claimed in an interview at his home in Balingazay that the cry was on August 26th and not on any other date. He remembered how the Katipunan leaders were gathered in his cousin's house, how Apollonia Samson butchered cows, pigs, and chicken for the said Katipuneros. He recalls stories of how he would follow them and listen in on group meetings where he often heard about the plans for the revolution. He recalled the meetings being so captivating, especially when the Supremo was the one talking with a loud voice, easily dominating the discussions, recognizing Emilio Jacinto as a boyish lad taking down notes next to Andres Bonifacio. He recalls the discussion of the revolution being so intense and heated than usual in the morning of August 26th, arguing about pushing the plan early and that the revolution will start on the 29th of August. Shortly after, he sees Bonifacio standing up in front of the crowd giving a speech, and remembers the crowd's response shouting in agreement as they tear their cedulas into pieces. The Katipuneros then went to Tandang Sora where the first fight happened. He witnessed the fight between the Katipuneros and the Spaniards. There were 80 civil guards and infantrymen. On the other hand, the Katipuneros were only armed by bolos and spears, unlike the firearms of the enemy. He even saw lives lost and those who were injured in the midst of the chaos. Simplico Acabo launched at the civil guard with his bolo and was killed by a bullet. The civil guards retreated towards Manila after Acabo was terribly wounded. Soon after, the Katipuneros left Balintawak along with his father and brother. He may not have remembered what they did next. Instead, he knew the repressive measures the Spaniards took in Balintawak. Repressive measures such as how people with no cedulas were left with scars on their left arms. Some were sent to jail, others were exiled in Guam. Even Tandang Sora, the mother of Katipunan.
Don Vicente believed that the cry did happen in Balintawak, and I quote, "Don't ever believe the stories that the first fight happened in other places. They were just made up to distort the true story of the revolution." With the backup statement of Don Vicente as told and discussed a while ago, August 26, 1986 seems to be the most realistic and much more appealing to the audience, as well as to us, the researchers. He is considered to be an eyewitness. He also remembered the event precisely, thus making his story a credible one as a primary source. His account were similar to Masangkai's. Salmon and Masangkai's story depicted on Dr. Borromeo Buehler, who is the granddaughter of Guillermo Masangkai, a Katipunero who worked closely with Andres Bonifacio from the earliest days of the Katipunan, claims in her book that this is a historical distortion. She proved that the initial skirmish of the revolution of 1896 occurred in Balintawak, not elsewhere, and that it happened no sooner or later than 26 August 1896.
Dr. Borromeo Buehler also agrees with the story of Guillermo Masangkai, who claimed to be a member of the secret chamber of the Katipunan and was one of those named by Bonifacio to kill Tomas Remigio. if the latter betrayed the secret association after analyzing their version of the cry. On the nights of the 24th and 25th of August 1896, possibly without the Katipunan authorization, a group of malhechores raided Chinese dry goods stores in Balintawak, drawing fire from the civil guard. But these incidents preceded the encounter the following day, when the civil guard clashed with the Katipuneros. This, according to Dr. Borromeo Buehler, was the start of the Philippine Revolution of 1896.
To summarize our study, there are indeed many varying viewpoints regarding how the events in the latter half of August 1896 took place. And while these contradictory statements about them model this important turning point in the history of the Philippines, it remains that this paper's purpose to attempt to provide an accurate timeline of what happened during that time. Based on the accounts studied, the conclusion reached was that the cry of Balintawak occurred on August 26, 1896. Isn't that right, Daryl?
Yes, it does seem to be the case upon our findings. This conclusion was reached after noting how many of the accounts corroborated with each other regarding the date, sharing a lot of similarities in their testimonies with each other. Two most known accounts, Masangkai's and Samson's, both state that they witnessed the cry led by Bonifacio and his fellow Katipuneros on the 26th. Another account that agrees with this narrative is the one of Dr. Borromeo Buehler, who, in great detail, proved in her novel that the cry could not have taken place anywhere other than Balintawak, and at any time other than on that specific day. Yet, another witness who agrees with this dating is Don Vicente, a Balintawak native who confirmed the cry of Balintawak's authenticity and remembered it clearly as one of the surviving witnesses of the event that unfolded soon after, making him a reliable primary source. Each of their testimonies' similarities, despite being independent of one another, make it a lot more accurate to believe that August 26, 1896 is the real date of the first cry of the Philippine Revolution. It could be considered more reliable than it would be if all of them outright contradicted each other, and since there doesn't seem to have been any coordination between all of them, makes it likely that each of them experienced the same situation instead of being coerced to agree with the general consensus.
To give clarification, we have concluded that the timeline of the first cry started on the 26th, and that's when the conflicts between the two sides began, as proved by the accounts of Masangkai and Samson. Just as Ambeth R. Ocampo said, we can peg the beginning of the revolution to the very first encounter between the Katipuneros and the Guardia Civil in Balintawak on August 26, 1896. For the moment, let us leave things at that and proceed to other matters. In my opinion, it is the significance of the event rather than the date and place that makes Balintawak, August 26, 1896, a landmark in our history. On behalf of Group 3
And 4,
we thank you for lending us your eyes and ears as well as your time. We hope you have a great day. Stay safe and God bless.